Good afternoon. How are you? Well, I'm walking slowly and briefly. And the Thomas Jefferson report is that it's about 60-something, low 60s. And you can feel the moisture in the air. You can see it behind me. And it's pleasant. And hopefully it won't rain heavy before I cut short my 20-minute walk. It takes some getting used to because I don't like to think in those terms. But I have learned over a lifetime of resistance that listening to doctors is not a bad idea. I have a feeling, a sense of revulsion, shared by many, that the Republican method is brutal, inhumane, misleading, and its solitary objective is an overriding desire to win at all costs. I've always believed that if you don't have a raison d'etre, you don't have issues, then in politics, when you pick up the phone, you get a dial tone. You don't get a message. But the message of the Republicans appears to be a chaotic impulse to have it their way on a changeable basis from moment to moment, with nothing deeper than that. No even false body of philosophy like you'd get from Buckley in the days of yore, and some of the leading Republicans in the history of that grand old party, and certainly nothing like Lincoln, or even a very different kind of Republican like Teddy Roosevelt. So we have a vast, arid wasteland of hyperventilating, ambitious people whose only objective is to win. And in the House, when they had the speakership fight, it's clear that Scalise was probably hounded out of winning the conference, that is, getting a majority in the Republican conference on the House side, based on his illness, which involves some blood disease, which has been characterized, I assume properly, as not as dangerous as some other kinds of cancers. And my aunt had a cancer that went on for many years into her 90s. So I know it can happen, and you don't know what you're made of until you're confronted with that. But the guy's taken a bullet, and he's been ill, and he's been doing his job. Now, I don't support him. My views are very different than his. He didn't learn anything from being shot about the Second Amendment. But the rules that they set up were not followed. And so then No Jacket Jordan moves into that gap, and he is now this chosen person in that group. Now, this is an example of what I'm saying about this feeling of revulsion. Now, people who don't always know why get that sensation. Among us, there are times when we're taking off from listening to the news. We're avoiding it because it's so hateful and destructive sometimes. And we can't wrap our minds around people who could do these things. And I'm just talking domestically right now. And so what we have is a reaction among the voters. Now, in Virginia a couple of years ago, when they were looking at Virginia as a bellwether state that might indicate to the rest of the country what matters, I thought then that people were reacting to the very sorry, inchoate passage that Republicans were making during the election that didn't justify a vote. And so people reacted against that. And I see it now in local races and in national races, the same kind of thing going on. And I think it's why we see fewer political signs this year. It's not that they cost so much. There's a different kind of campaigning. In Virginia, this is an off-year election. And the the turnout is usually low, but I'm very curious to see what's going to happen on November 7th this year, here and elsewhere. So I think this is an indication that's positive for Democrats and independents who believe in a democracy, that we are all equal, and that we can be represented in a Republican government. When I say Republican, I mean small r, the republic, a representative government, not a dictatorship, not a totalitarian government. Now, so I think we are seeing our culture evolving, and it's what may save us from the extremes that we're dealing with. Now, consider how Congress might work. I heard somebody say on the radio, well, I guess it's on TV, but I'm listening to the sound, and they were saying, well, on Monday they'll come back and the Republicans will decide what to do about the speakership. Well, usually what Mondays are is people come into town on Monday. And there's usually at least one calendar that day, and it's toward the end of the day, so people can be traveling and get to Washington, D.C. in time for a late afternoon vote. And that vote is really the consent calendar. And the consent calendar is non-controversial matters that nobody's going to object to. And so they're proposed, and 3 guys in the chamber and 2 women, it could be any number of people, that's all that's there. And the question is it unanimous? And they take a voice vote and it passes. So that saves a lot of time on non-controversial matters. Now, if you decide that you want to attack one of these matters, if somebody puts something on that calendar that has controversy, it only takes one person to say, I want a roll call vote, and they may not be able to get a quorum because people are still coming into town. So Monday is lost. So then we have Tuesday. And Tuesday we might start having hearings. We might have decisions on the floor. And the way any vote comes to the floor is by what they call a rule. It describes how the bill is presented on the floor. May there be amendments, how much time people can speak, and so on. This is to make the body look more efficient and be efficient at a time when we're not seeing a lot of that. People are playing fast and loose with the rules, and they should probably be arrested for impersonating members of Congress because they don't know what they're doing. So that's kind of how Congress works. Now, what is it going to take for a new speaker? The answer is 217 votes. The Democrats have 212 votes. So there are 5 votes that if the Democrats could get them from the Republicans, Jeffries, who is now the minority leader, could be the speaker. There are some Republicans who are upset with the governing majority, and you can see why. I mean, you see what was done to Scalise. Not that it's crocodile tears, but you get the idea. So there might be 5 people that could join the Democrats, and then we could have a Democratic leader in a joined government of some Republicans, Democrats, and I don't know that there are any independents presently. So that would be quite the thing. The split in the House under those circumstances could go forward with the spending bills and other things. In other words, the Congress that has ground to a halt, is unable to do anything without a speaker, could be revived and not only have a speaker, but deal with the spending bill and to do what a governing body is supposed to do. So that's what I hope will happen. Now, it would be historic. It's a long shot. It depends upon the people who are in the Republican Party saying, it's not worth being here unless we're actually going to do something. It's like being in the minority because we can't pass anything. So let's create a majority, a working majority, and get something done that we can be proud of and go home. Now, I don't know if they have all those sentiments. You could be pretty Machiavellian about how to do this. But I think that there is a possibility. Is it as likely as all the air in the room is going to go to one corner and leave us asphyxiated? No, but it's a low percentage because of all the challenges to the people, the Republicans particularly, who have to take that step. It's not to say that there wouldn't be Democrats that would rail in their caucus against whatever the agreement was that made it possible for these Republicans to join with the Democrats. Now, let's turn over to Israel and Hamas. We have to be careful when we have two sides perhaps doing the same thing that is wrong. And we have to be careful because, not just because it is a war crime, if it's that serious, but because if it goes forward in such a fashion that we are destroying innocent people's lives in large numbers, we will invite others to join in the fight. The old Irish thing, is this a private fight or can anybody join in? Well, this is quite a public fight, and everybody has an interest here. We don't know exactly what they'll do. So what am I talking about? Okay, so we had a whole bunch of outrages in which, of course, it's a surprise attack. Civilians are hurt. It shouldn't matter whether they're babies or 85-year-old men or women. There is no fair rationale for treating any other person who is innocent and is not a combatant as something you can just kill. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how they die. It doesn't matter if they're quartered, pulled apart by animals. Death is death. And I don't know how you can describe what is a worse death, but there it is. Now, what is comparable, and this is, people are getting beaten up about this, but Netanyahu is very comfortable, I think, trying to annihilate Hamas. And in the bargain, innocents who all live together in this area that is so small, and Netanyahu has surrounded it on the air, the land, the water. And so Gaza is a prison. And in that prison, it's been denied water, electricity. And on top of that, the warning that people get is Netanyahu says, go to the south. 1 million people go to the south. Leave your homes behind and go to the south. Now, does that mean when it's over, you're going to return to the hovel that is all that is left because of it? So, on the home stage and the foreign stage, we are not acquitting ourselves well as a civilization. The standard of a civilization is how we treat our own. And we're not treating our own very well. We're not treating others very well. And this kind of unkind government can only lead to unkind acts, can only lead to more death and destruction, more suffering. And that has to come to an end. Enough is enough. And we believe it and we say it. But we have alliances to an idea that is being misrepresented by the key players, both Hamas and, in my opinion, Netanyahu. And I've heard people who just raised the question about how can we do this to minimize the death and destruction and the hurt, particularly of innocents, and move on to a place where we might somehow, after all these missteps and all these failures, have some sort of agreement going forward. And that is a multiple dimensional problem for sure, given the fact that both sides want the other dead, eliminated completely. Hamas says it in its basic documents, and the plan that Netanyahu has laid out is the same thing. We're going to crush people into the earth. We're going to push them out the south side of into Egypt. And Egypt isn't going to open up because it doesn't want to take on so many people from the Gaza. So we have, if we look at the numbers now, according to the reports, Israel has lost 1,200 people, and in Gaza there's something like 2,100. So what kind of a result is that? We have the best and the brightest involved in this. And here's the final question. What do you do as a president in such circumstances if you believe that Netanyahu only cares about the absolute destruction and elimination of Hamas and anybody who's in Gaza? Because that surely seems like the effect of what has been described as one of the most densely populated places on earth. I find that hard to believe. I've been to India in some locations, and I can't imagine it being more densely populated than that, but here we are. So, what do I think we have? I think we have change. I think the vectors are toward the light. I think they're toward positive. I think people are recoiling from the failures of the Republicans here at home and of our ally abroad. And I think that if we stay the course, if we have an open discussion about this, if we continue to make there be pressure on our own government and the players in this, we have a chance of saving some innocent people, maybe many innocent people, from the death and destruction that is contemplated by Netanyahu. And we all understand revenge, and we all understand that we have to take a breather and decide if that's the right result. And when the heat comes from anger and fury and getting even and so forth, there's a price to pay for that, because it doesn't end there. It begins a cycle that is interminable, that can destroy everything, all the best wishes, all the beliefs, entire civilizations. And we can't have that. We can't have a World War III, because no one knows once this gets started where it's going to end. And we're right now moving into the tail of this dangerous time in the Middle East. And we have our own problems at home if there is no way to cut the Gordian knot and bring us to a solution in which the Congress is working again. So those are my observations on this kind of rainy day. I'm walking slowly, I'm obeying my doctor, and I'm cutting my conversation with you guys briefly. And this is kind of close to where I walk with the trees, but I'm trying to avoid sloping roads. All the best. Bye-bye.